Thank you, Dr. Boozer. Thank you, board, for this opportunity. We'll take a minute here to introduce ourselves. My name is Mike Lair. I'm the Executive Director for Teaching and Learning, and I'll turn it over to Suzanne, and we'll go to Dr. Ward as well.
Good evening. Suzanne Meisland, Executive Director of Special Education.
Great, thank you. Rhonda Thornton, Executive Director of Data and Accountability.
My name is David Reif. I serve as the Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning.
James Harden, Executive Director of Family and Community Engagement. Social emotional.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cynthia Watson. I'm the Director of School Improvement.
I'm John L. Baskett. I'm the Director of Pre-K-5 Teaching and Learning.
I'm Dr. Angela Ward, Assistant Superintendent. I don't want to throw you all off. I will be joining in. Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Engagement and the new Supervisor for our secondary campuses.
All right, thank you, team. And as Dr. Boozer said, all of the work and the initiatives that you're hearing about that go along with this report are strongly aligned, and we use our strategic plan as our guide. And that begins with our vision, which is to empower each learner to thrive in a diverse and changing world, and our mission to positively transform learning and life outcomes for students through educational justice, equity, and excellence.
So we talk a lot about the strategic plan. Everything that we talk about tonight, we'll really hone in on one of our 5 priorities. Of course, instructional excellence, we've talked about a lot during the presentations. We've also talked about educational access. Dr. Harden and others have talked about family community engagement, talked about organizational alignment and strategic resource allocation, which Linda Matowski just got to talk to us about the levy and how we use those resources. So everything we do is framed around those 5 priorities because our strategic plan guides our work. So hopefully what you'll hear today is not just about the school designations, but how we are monitoring the work that our community and our board has charged us to do.
And what we're doing about the data. Yes.
So one of our highlights that we wanted to start this presentation with is the work we've done as it ties to our strategic plan over the last 4 years. And so we have a column of just amazing facilities, upgrades that we've done as part of the referendum work within our community, as well to look at a brand new Dr. Howard Elementary School, the additions and improvements to Southside, as well as Edison, Centennial, Central, a brand new International Prep Academy for K-5, the improvements to the Columbia Center and the RISE Center at Columbia, the Young Adult Program at Randolph, and so many of the athletic fields, playgrounds, marquees, buses, transportation software, just so much that we're so proud of that we need and have really helped to enhance the teaching and learning throughout the district. We also have brought over the last several years several curricular adoptions to the board, also a complete shift in philosophy in our reading instruction, moving in full alignment with the science of reading. We have adopted CKLA, Amplify CKLA, as our new elementary curriculum. And last year was our first year of full implementation of that curriculum. We are currently piloting new resources in our middle school and high school, and we'll be hoping to bring a recommendation for secondary ELA curriculum to you this spring. And so we have new math resources that we rolled out during COVID and our distance learning plan for elementary, and shortly after that here with secondary. So lots of big changes, understanding the needs that came forward as part of the needs assessment that we did with the strategic planning process, but as well as the goals outlined in the strategic plan. Including even our PACE framework that came to you earlier last year and then earlier this school year. The brand new School Links platform that really helps to support college and career readiness for each and every child from middle school through high school in their academic coursework, their planning, and meetings with counselors and families. To go to the far right column, we just wanted to highlight a few of the strategic initiatives that we have used the strategic plan to help, but also to help align and support the vision that Dr. Boozer has had for our district and the leadership that she has brought to us. So that includes the expansion of pre-K programming. We've talked to you, and you had a presentation earlier this fall from Dr. Ward and her team about the expansion of AVID district-wide. We're continuing to see that growth each and every school year. Dr. Boozer's helped us to bring SAM's process, coaching and professional development for administrators to the district, as well as our 3-year partnership now with Focus Schools to help drive school and district improvement and for each and every school. We had the early release days that were part of the last contract that started 3 years ago. We had longer attendance days that started last school year at the elementary school. Just many, many partnerships, many great initiatives that we've accomplished together, and just wanted to spend some time that there are many factors contributing to the growth and to the work and success that you're seeing here today.
Mike, can I add that what you're seeing is a progression as we move from the bricks and the mortar to the curricular adoption. Those are the resources we're using to get the work done. Then you start to see the strategic initiatives. So you start to see those layers come on board, as a strategic plan should. You say change takes time. You're seeing a lot of iterations and phases of what that change looks like.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. And with that, I know Rhonda's going to talk a little bit about the school designation process, but I'll also give her a shout out as well, as she's leading the work with transitioning to a new student information system. We approved that earlier, the board approved that earlier, but that will take effect for next school year. And but she's in countless meetings helping to get us ready. It's a major undertaking, and a big shout out to her and her team.
Thank you, Mike. All right, so Dr. Boozer already mentioned that last year we did a very comprehensive reporting of the data that determines the school designation. So this slide should just hopefully jog your memory a little bit about how the designations are determined. And I think one of the things that's really important to point out is that this data is based upon certain criteria, and it's based upon certain grade bands, right? It's not showing all K-12 students because not all K-12 students take the assessments. So when we're looking at our elementary and middle schools, 75% of the designation is based upon academic indicators. 50% is based upon growth, and the 3rd through 8th graders are who take the IAR. And in order to have growth, you have to have a year of your baseline data. And so when you're looking at the growth, we're looking really at the elementary level at just the 4th and 5th graders, because you have to have that 3rd grade year as your baseline year. So the growth is based upon 4th through 8th grade at the elementary and middle school, where the proficiency is 3rd grade through 8th grade. And then for science proficiency, remember that the science test is administered at 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, right? So it's not showing us science proficiency for K-12 students. It's those specific ones that are part of the designation. And then 25% of the rating is based upon your school quality and student success indicators. And I know Dr. Boozer mentioned the climate survey. The climate survey is administered 4th grade through 12th grade. So again, different grade bands are highlighted in the school designation. The other thing that I'd like to remind you is that the data is based upon students who have been enrolled in our district at least half of the school year. And ISB has operationalized that at 134 days. So the data that is reported is being reported on students who've been enrolled with us and who've been with us for over half the year, right? So if they come in late, they are not counted towards the school designation. Could you do the next slide for me, please? All right, so this is a nice way for each school to be able to go in and take a look, because it is comprehensive, it is multiple measures. And ISB implemented kind of the schoolhouse, we call it the schoolhouse, the house display, the visual, which is a very nice way to really be able to look at each one of those items to see how did the schools rank or rate in each one of the areas. And so basically, you can also see what student groups are impacted at each one of the schools. And we call them student groups. We don't like to call them subgroups. We like to call them student groups because no person is sub below another person, so we call them student groups. And so the schools can go in and they can look to see where their students are and how they've performed based upon these multiple measures. ISB also then takes a look at when they do their ranking and all of the scores come in, they do their ranking, they take the top 10%, then they find the lowest 5%, and that becomes their threshold. And so then the schools then look at each one of their student groups to see if they had any one student group that fell below the threshold, that's when they are considered either targeted or comprehensive. And so here you can see it kind of talks a little bit, I know there's a lot kind of going on in this slide, but we really wanted you to see that there are 5 levels of the summative designations. The exemplary, that's your top 10%. The intensive support, anything comprehensive and below, that is the lowest 5%. And then the schools can go in and look to see, like I said, they use those threshold scores, and the threshold scores vary from year to year depending on how students have performed statewide. And so you can see also on the right-hand side then, all of our schools and what their designations are. And this is readily available on the ISB Illinois, or actually the Illinois School Report Card. What we added was so that way people could look to see exactly which student groups fell kind of below that threshold. So you will notice that if they fell below the threshold, we've listed the student group, and those are schools that are either targeted or comprehensive. And so Unit 4, we don't have any intensive schools, and so that's a good place for us to be, is we don't have any intensive schools. Mike, do you have anything to add to this slide?
Yeah, I'll just add that there are 11 different student groups that there can be a calculation for. So on the previous slide, we showed this particular school, I believe, has 9 different student groups that you can filter with the drop-down menu on the left and see what the house looks like for that particular student group. By the house, I'm saying what the ELA proficiency level might be for that group within the school. If there are not 20 or more students in that particular student group, then it won't show that student group. And you have to remember that are there 20 or more 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in an elementary school of a particular student group that took the assessment. If there's 19, that group won't show up under that drop-down menu for that school. Same thing for growth. Are there 20 or more 4th and 5th graders for the climate survey, for example? So you might see a student group or something showing up for a student group in one box, but maybe not the other. And that has to do with privacy rules and regulations of making sure that we don't have identifiable information on the school report card. Okay, so that's just a factor. And then what you see here is the number of some schools have 3 student groups that have been identified for improvement as part of the school improvement process, not only for us as a district, but that we want to submit and work with the state on to ensure that that's part of our school improvement plans. We also, Dr. Watson and Christelle Harding sent forward our school improvement plans for all of our schools. We believe this process is important for each and every school, so we brought you all of our school improvement plans as well as the ones that are required by the state as part of the consent agenda item later tonight. And so I also want to say the state uses the phrase all. All doesn't mean all of the student groups. It's overall, the all group is the overall group or all student group being measured. So when you see all there, that's what it's referring to. It's not referring to each and every student group within the school.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that reminder. I wanted to make sure we talked about the fact that you have to have at least 20 for there to be a student group for it to be reported. Because I know sometimes you can go on and you can see and it'll say data has been redacted. That's when that is an indicator to you that we don't have enough students for us to report out on that data. And of course, ISB is going to be careful and protect the privacy of students. So that's why you might see where it says data has been redacted. That just means we don't have enough students for that student group data to be reported on.
And that's why you'll see more student groups in our middle schools and high schools because they're so much larger than our elementary schools.
All right. All right.
All right, well, hold on one second. Mr. Brown had a question.
I just wanted to ask this question now as opposed to waiting until later when we start talking about other things. So if I'm understanding you correctly, instead of there being an acknowledgement up front that we don't have the numbers for a specific group, it will just say data redacted. Is that to be understood?
Yes, there are certain places in the Illinois Interactive Report Card where you will see data has been redacted, and that's what that indicates.
And it also may indicate that the number is so small, they redacted it too, so they don't inadvertently identify who the students are.
Okay, so either way, it's going to show up redacted. Okay. Because my question was going to be, is there any way for us to upfront say that a certain student group isn't reflected in this data, but as you just stated, it's to
Protect their identity, yes.
And it also depends on which building too. So it could differ.
So instead of saying redacted on this particular slide, which we also included, it's under the menu on the left, under the accountability section, and click on summative designation. That will give you this visual. And so rather than saying redacted on this particular slide, it just will not list some of our student groups that are smaller, right? They just won't be listed as a choice.
Did you have?
Yep, Mrs. Armstrong.
What would be an example of that? And is that correlated to attendance? Are these students that didn't take the test because they didn't have enough attendance days? Or is this, what are we isolating this to? What does that mean?
My understanding is that if we didn't have 20 students, so for the test score, it wouldn't be, that actually took the test, where we have numbers that we have to meet for participation rates already, and our rates are very high. And so that's not a major factor as we think about attendance, but if we don't have data, they would not be, we need 20 students. But for all of the other categories, they are based on all students, all of our students.
So I can give you one example, a common one in the House that's missing. So again, the drop down, you're not going to see all of those student groups listed if there's not 20 or more kids. But in the House, the EL P2P, that's English Learner Progress to Proficiency, is often one that we have schools that don't have enough kids to qualify for. So what the state then does is take that 5% of data and redistributes it among all of the other data points. So you may pull up a school that instead of 7.5 for their ELA proficiency, it's actually 8.3, right? And that's because there's one of those bricks in the house there's not enough kids for, so they redistribute those 5 points among the other bricks in the house.
Another example, Amy, would be students with disabilities. So if you think about an elementary building, K-5, and we might have 50 students total, but only the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are taking them, you're excluding K-1 too. So you may not make a student group of 20.
Yep, great question. And when they average out those numbers, it has to stay in the academic field. If we don't have the English progress to proficiency, English learner progress to proficiency, it stays in the academic indicator, so it's balanced out across the remaining 6 indicators that you see for elementary. If it's part of the, in the yellow, it would be balanced out in the yellow section.
But I honestly, and I think what I also heard Board Member Armstrong ask, if the students weren't with us to take the test, that does not, there are makeups for them, but it wouldn't be in there as redacted if they didn't take the test. It's only the students who actually took the test.
Yep.
And do you have a number of, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I can get into this later, students are not allowed to test if they miss more than 10 days, right? Is attendance tied to the
No.
test?
No, we want every student to.
They still
yep.
take it.
It's
Thank
a
you.
totally separate
They still take it,
indicator
yes.
that we report on. Yep. Great
That's
question.
why
Thank you.
Our participation rate is fairly high.
Yes, it is.
While we're talking about this and some of the specific data points, with regards to our English learners, because that was brought up, we don't have, am I correct that we don't have a way to distinguish, okay, English learners were in 7th grade, we came in 1st grade versus we came in 7th grade, and those tests are all given in English?
Yeah, come join us, Carolyn.
Our Director of Multilingual Services will step up and help answer that.
Microphone, Carolyn. Can you speak into the microphone?
Sorry, I'm not quite clear what
Okay,
you're
so I
asking.
guess I'm looking at some of the data, like, for example, Central has a large population of English learners, specifically from Guatemala. So with that population, are we looking at, when we do English learners, well, one, are these tests given in native language, or are they all in English?
Okay, so there are different parts to this. So the IAR test and everything, the state standardized testing is all done in English because we're measuring what they know in English. Now at IPA, for instance, we do a Spanish test as well as English test to see where they are with both languages. But state standardized testing, unless we're giving instruction in the native language, we try not to assess them in the native language because the academic language that's taught is totally different.
So given that, and I guess I'm looking at some of our, test scores and stuff, it's specifically looking, because I've had some conversations at the high school level. So if because our MLL learners have gone up to 17%, very largely in the past 5, 6, 7 years. That's going to impact, if you're coming in and you're new to this country, and you're coming in as a freshman, sophomore, you're going to essentially not be passing those tests.
Yes.
If you're not speaking, if it's in English and you don't know how to speak English. So how is the state how is that going to skew not skew our data, but impact our data? And is the state ever going to allow kind of a accommodation for that?
That's a state question. I'm sorry. I would love to say that it's my decision. At our district, for instance, for MAP testing, it's our district-driven test. For that one, we do make some accommodations for our multilingual learners. So for instance, if they're coming in and screened at 1.0 to 1.5, which is very beginning level, and it's their first year, we try to exempt them from that MAP test, unless the parents want to try it and the kid wants to try it. That's an exception to that rule. So not to kind of gauge and not to stress the students out in the first year of coming and trying to get acclimated and whatnot, we let that happen. As for state standardized testing, we don't have the call to make that. So we have to go with what the state is mandating. So in that case, that's where that language component was coming in. That's what I was saying. If it's instruction is done in a native language, then we could assess them in the native language. But if it's not, then we're doing disservice for our kiddos twice.
Yeah. So like going back to the summative design we were just there. For Central's always at a lower level until and it's because of our English learners. That's going to be consistently that way indefinitely as long as we have new English learners who come into our schools at that age. We're going to always be in that category.
And that's a great question and an awesome point that you bring up. So I will say, being a part of Vision 2030, being one of the superintendents that's been a part of that work and having conversations with our state superintendent, they are in the process right now of re-establishing how assessments are done and the accountability piece. So this next year will probably be the last year that it looks like this. And they are looking at new ways in which to really assess our students in an equitable and a fair way, because they know that we are identifying students in schools incorrectly, because this assessment, it really is not equitable in that regard. So having a state superintendent who knows this, who comes from a district that has a large MLL population, understands this, and so they're going to start having listening visits So when they're in this area, I'll definitely make sure everybody knows. So if you, as a parent or an educator, want to give input, that we would welcome that. So what you're saying is absolutely 100% on. But at this point in time, we have no control over that. So we just do what we can with what we have, but know that it is going to be changing.
Can we look at our data, taking that component out, like taking out, say, at the high school? Not that you wouldn't want to, take out MLL learners and not include them, but since we've had such an increase, factoring that into, okay, how are non-MLL learners doing? And let's track that.
I think we do have that information. It's already pulled out because we disaggregate the data, so we can look at every student group. So that's why when you look at the house, you see what each student group looks like. And so those student groups that are impact the data we can look at those, and we can give that to you in a different way as well. But we do have that available. Yep. You're welcome.
Yep. One other factor, and I'll just go back to this slide very quickly, is for the high school on the bottom right side, graduation is half of the summative designation. And so while elementary and middle school, there's a strong focus on proficiency, growth, and chronic absenteeism. In the high school, the biggest factor is graduation rates for 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates. And so as we look at a designation for high school, that's just another piece that we want to continue to look at. So with that, I'll go back to Rhonda.
Thank you. All right. So Dr. Boozer already mentioned our enrollment, our trend over time. And so I just wanted to bring this back just to highlight that our enrollment, this is the snapshot. This is kind of what was always known as the fall housing report that ISB requires. So this is what we've reported to ISB this year as how many students we had in our schools as of October 1st. And as Dr. Boozer mentioned, every day is registration day in Unit 4. The 10,503 was as of October 1st, but it got as high as 10,536. It's down to 10,515 as of this morning. Our student assignment specialists, Heidi and Tina, they are registering families every day. They registered 22 new families last week. And so when we look at our enrollment and you see different enrollment information, you're like, well, it said 10,295 there, but it says 10,250 over here. Why is there such a big difference? It's based upon when that data was pulled. And do we see that much fluctuation in our enrollment? Yes, we do. And so that's part of our story, is that we are seeing, we're enrolling students, but we're also withdrawing students. So when we look at some of the other data that we're going to look at here in a few minutes, you're going to see that it was reported as 10,250 for the 23-24 school year, but on October 1st, it was 10,295 of last year. That's last year's data. Yep. All right.
Yeah, that's just a really important point to make, that the data that we're looking at comes from last school year, but we wanted to bring a few pieces from this school year about the work we've already been doing for the first 2 quarters or the first semester of the school year, being here in December already.
I want to interject, and it's crucial that we point that out because we don't get this data until October, and we've already into the school year. So we are already looking at ways in which we can address our data way before we actually get the data released to us, because it's embargoed until October 30th.
30th.
And then, so we already know, and we're already moving toward that. So I want to shout out our principals and our teachers and our staff for already taking a look at data and moving forward, even though we don't have the official state data.
Well, and here's something that, in a partnership that we started last year, we brought a similar slide to you from the ECRA group last year. The ECRA group is an independent partner, works with districts throughout the state. They conduct comparative analysis of where we are compared to other LUDA districts, and we wanted to focus on where are we in Central Illinois? How do we compare to our peers within Central Illinois in a variety of factors? And so this is around the enrollment data. Rhonda was just showing you overall numbers. This helps to break that down and to take a look at how are these numbers, as well as some of our data that we're going to look at later, how do we compare to other large unit districts. So LUDA standing for LU, large unit districts, which means districts that serve students from kindergarten all the way through high school. And so they're K-12 districts. Not all districts in Illinois are K-12. Some are just high school districts. Some are just elementary districts. And so we wanted a comparison with other LUDA districts in central Illinois.
And similar demographics,
With-
that's the key piece.
yep.
Similar demographics as us.
And so the report is ECRA's report. The one column that we added ourselves to this report is the data that we brought to you last school year from ECRA. So the column in the far left, in the blue column, is the state average, where the state is in 2024 last year. The comparative group, so it takes us plus 7 other Central Illinois LUDA districts and gives you that comparative group average. And then you have where Unit 4 is in each of these characteristics in orange. And then next to that is what we added. That's that comparison to 2023. And so as you look at that, our white student group is down just slightly, 1.5 percentage points. Our black student group is up 0.5 percentage point. And you can see that that's just a quick reference to what are some of the changes that we're seeing from last school year. Are there any questions there about this slide? Because we're going to use a similar template a couple other times tonight.
Noticing the change for low-income student, what do you have anything to attribute to that decrease?
Linda, can you help us? We talked about this earlier.
Linda Matkowski has talked about this a lot, and I know she's done a lot of research into this as to why we're seeing that dip in our low income.
So we saw it last year partially because we were still coming off the pandemic, so there was a lot of pandemic aid that was still being supplied. So if you remember, low income is really a federal number, right, that they create. So to some extent, it's a federal number they create. At the same time, they're also providing a lot of additional COVID benefits, which helped raise everybody's income level. And we were at fuller employment. So there's been a lot of news articles recently about Champaign County actually being only one of 2 counties in the state that actually showed an increase in full employment, right? So we're nearing a much higher employment level in the county. Given the sort of economic development around Champaign as a city, it makes sense that Champaign City actually has a fairly high employment rate too. What's been interesting over the last several months, and we've been tracking it, is we've reversed course. So all of a sudden, we're seeing a larger percentage of students and families that are coming into the school district that are now qualifying as low income, either directly through the state with direct certification or through an economic test that is provided. You know, they fill it, kind of the old school, they fill out the paper. So probably 95 to 96% of all of our free and reduced lunch qualified students are coming through direct certification from the state. And then the remaining portion of it, we're working with the families to actually go through the paperwork to make the determination. So they still have to hit the federal level, but for some reason they're not attempting to try to receive direct certification benefits. So there's a little more work I want to do, because what I don't understand is what happened today with the release of the economic data showing that Champaign County was doing so well from an employment standpoint versus what we're seeing with an increasing trend. So that when I work with other cabinet members, the conversation is, hey, let's help me understand what I'm seeing and how does it fit and where are we going with it. So more to come on that, but largely free and reduced lunch sort of qualifier information is coming directly through certification that's happening every day with the state of Illinois. So some of it, I'm sure, is a backlog of stuff that is happening at the state level that we were seeing last year. So it'll probably I'm assuming it's going to start to normalize a little bit.
So in this ECRA group comparison that they put forth here, obviously these are somewhat geographically close, but I guess my question is if you look at the graphs that they put forth on the report card, low income's obviously a deciding factor largely in academic performance on a lot of levels. Why is ECRA choosing what they are here when we seem to be much lower than, say, compares to Danville, that's 85%, Decatur 62, Kankakee 89% low income? Am I reading that correctly? So we are not, like, in our comparison charts, obviously populations aren't exactly the same here, but why? So, like, is there a reason why they're just doing it geographically and not doing it more based on low income when they have that, I don't know, there's a graph in there that's got all the scatter plots of the different school or different districts, why they wouldn't put us with a similarly matched size and low income?
We are with similar, this is school districts that are similar demographics as we are. It might be because they are close, but they are similar demographics. And so we chose which ones, we asked them to tell, which ones we're very similar to demographic-wise, and that's why we have these here.
Okay, so you're using demographic so you're using
Demographics.
student demographics and not low income not being a deciding factor in what we're, okay. So that,
Correct.
okay, that makes sense.
Good
Right,
question.
and we wanted to focus on the fact that they were also LUDA districts, right? And so it was a choice that we made as to which 7 districts we wanted to have the comparison for, and they're the same ones that we used last year as well when we did this report.
Yeah, and just add another part about the ECRA group. We'll talk more about them a little bit later, but we're really excited about this partnership. Rhonda and I just had a meeting last week with them about what they're able to provide. And as part of the state designation process, schools are given designations. There isn't a district designation. And we are tied and we support all of our schools. We understand that. But they're able to combine our data. They're able to look at this and pull files directly from the state and put it together in a more dynamic fashion for us. This is a static report. But we're really excited about what they can do with their predictive analytics. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That's a newer report that we're going to be able to get because that was something you all approved earlier this fall when Dr. Bruiser brought that forward. They're also able to help use this data platform and dashboard to help us with program evaluation as well as school improvement. So as we're starting to ask questions, it's going to be a much more dynamic platform that helps us to answer some of those questions. We're not going to have access to all the data from all the other school districts as you're going to see throughout today. We're going to have data to access to our own data, but they have a contract with the state where they're able to pull that information and combine it and put it together into reports like this. And that's part of what we get as part of our partnership. And so with that, we'll go to the next slide that gives you another report and another table that looks at enrollment, but also getting into those other important factors that we already talked about: attendance, mobility, chronic absenteeism being the factor that is weighted at around 20% for the school designation process. And I'm going to ask Dr. Harden to join in and share a few of the highlights. One of the pieces before I hand it to him is just the change that you see that the enrollment number, remember this is from last school year, was 10,250 for Unit 4, 10,250. That does not match the chart that Rhonda just went over because Rhonda's chart is from our fall housing report on October 1st, and the number from the state is the end of the school year number. So it's going to be slightly different than you just saw, but it is up 77 students from 2023. So it's just giving you, again, those trends in the little note to the right of the orange column. Just a quick reference, how does that compare to where we were last year? So with that, I'll pass it to Dr. Harden.
Absolutely. If you look at the chart above, we've tried to highlight a couple of areas, and it's just because some of these numbers are a little small, we wanted to just do some of the analysis for you. And you can see that we're very close in the attendance rate to all of our peer districts. We are all very, very close, and about 2.7% lower than the state average. And in upcoming slides, you'll see some growth and some moving in the right direction. And then when you look at chronic absenteeism that Dr. Boozer has mentioned a few different times, and I cannot stress enough, the idea of chronic absenteeism is missing school for any reason. That can be from I don't feel well to we're going to Disneyland. Missing school for any reason contributes to our chronic absenteeism. And you can see the chronic absenteeism rate for Unit 4 is about 4.8 percentage points lower than our peer average. Lower in this is a good thing. But, however, we are 8.7% higher than the state average. So we're moving in the right direction. We are doing better than our peer groups, our peer districts, if you will, but we still have a little bit of ways to go and a little bit more growth to hit the state average. And we expect to, continue to grow in that direction. So, next slide. We started to look specifically at some of our demographic groups and really break things down. And we used some of the idealism and the verbiage from the strategic plan to really dig into, who are we impacting, how are we impacting them, and what can we do? So one thing I want to point out is that little red sentence underneath the chart. And it's just a reminder that when we say SY, school year, SY, we're talking about the end of the year. So for example, the SY 2022 represents the totals reported to ISB on June 30th of 2022, which means that's the 2021-2022 school year. We good? All right. So when we look at the first column, if you will, where we say SY 2022, that is the 2021-2022 school year. We look at all of our students, and then we can go straight down that column, and we can see the demographics. And then if you continue to move to the right, the columns, to the right of the first one, you can see a continued growth to the point where SY 2024, which was the end of last school year, all of our students, we had 88.9% attendance rate amongst all of our students. And if you compare it to the previous year, it's about a 0.4% increase. Now, we pulled the data again at the start of the month, so around December 1, and you can see this year, almost halfway through the year, you can see another growth point. We're at about 90.6 for all of our students. And again, if you just compare the end of 2024, so SY 2024 to present day, you can see growth or more attendance by every student group here that's mentioned. This is a lot of intentional work, and huge shout out to Mr. Walker, Mr. Casillas, Mr. Caribou for what they've done with transportation, making sure that all of our students are getting to class or getting to school. Shout out to all of our administrators making sure that we are taking attendance accurately every day. Shout out to Dr. Boozer and everyone who is contributing to the messaging, even to the community as we go to the Community Coalition and other community partners that are having lots of conversations about attendance and making sure that every student, every day, no exceptions. And we cannot stress that enough. We still continue to refine some of our systems, and one thing that does continue to impact attendance that is hard for us to control is the idea of what I call our district and our community's most quiet epidemic, and that is homelessness. Right? When students don't have a place to go at night, it's certainly hard to get them here in the day. And we have that, and if I can put in just a shameless 22 seconds over homelessness, it's that time of year. And every day we're receiving calls from families saying they have nowhere to go at night. We're working with our community partners, the Regional Office of Education, United Way, and lots of other partners to do our best, Regional Planning Commission, to do our best to get students in places. But quite honestly and quite frankly, there is no available temporary housing in Champaign. So when a student is homeless, if they want somewhere to go, we're sending them to Peoria, unfortunately. And it's hard, if not impossible, to get a student who is sleeping in Peoria to school in the morning, all the way in Champaign. Y'all, this is a tough one. I mean, we shed many tears over our homeless families. So that's something that is hard for us to do, and it does impact our attendance. Of course, even if a student has a mental health need, and we strongly support students taking advantage of, making sure they are emotionally healthy when they come to school. ISB grants 5 days, but those do count towards our chronic absenteeism. So, again, it's all the messaging and messaging and messaging. And one thing that Dr. Boozer, you've said repeatedly is, the one thing that we can control is we have to be great when they get here. Make them want to come to school. Make parents want to send their students to school every day. So the thing that, we're doing lots systemically to work on attendance, as you all know, but the one thing that we're going to continue to do is to be great when our students arrive to school each day.
Thank you, Dr. Harden. Do you have any questions about attendance for Dr. Harden? Okay. So we brought several of these slides to you last month. We're not going to go through each and every piece of this, but we wanted to have a comprehensive report here for you all with all of our data, and because ELA is half of that designation for academics along with math, we wanted all the data in one place. We also have the state data for you from 2019 to present. We think about 2019, obviously, as that pre-COVID year, to take a look at where we were as we were doing our district needs assessment, as we were outlining the plans and the goals in our strategic plan. Obviously, 2020, we did not have data because that spring was interrupted by COVID. There was not a state assessment in 2020. In 2020, 2021, that 21 school year was distance learning for many students throughout the state, including here in Unit 4. And so we just want to make sure that we're remembering some of that history as we're looking back at where we are and what are the trends that we've seen as we're on our road not only to recovery, but to continue to meet and exceed the state averages. One of the areas that we want to highlight here, this is the proficiency levels in ELA on IAR. And so IAR stands for Illinois Assessment of Readiness. And again, it's given to students in grades 3 through 8. We are seeing steady growth in grades 3 through 8 since 2021 with that proficiency level from one year to the next. We're also seeing the reduction of the percentage of students who are in the red or not meeting on the IAR for ELA. And so to continue to see fewer and fewer students in the red, more and more students in the green is where we want to be. When the state gives the growth designation, they rate us on a percentile. Where are we? Where do we rank? And what percentile are we in for the state? And so the state would be at 50%. It's always at 50% for the growth rate. We've been in the mid 40s consistently. Our goal is to get to above the 50th percentile as a district or with any school and any student group. And we're not there. It's sort of been a consistent measure that we've seen. Last year was a little bit higher. We were at like 48. 48th percentile, which basically it's similar to what you would be in the growth percentile when talking about height and weight with your doctor. And so it's looking at where we might be, or at least, I don't think my doctor talks to me about my height and weight anymore, but with our children, I should say. When we talk with our doctor about our children.
That would be a gender-specific issue.
I don't want to know what percentile I'm in. Okay. Okay. But back, it's serious business, and one of the reasons why you can see just in the 2024 data why we're not above that 50th percentile is the state grew more than we grew. We're seeing steady growth, but we're not seeing that growth, the growth that's similar to what the state saw. And so basically, if you want to think about if we're in the 44th percentile, we are higher than 44% of the other school districts that are being compared to us. It's maybe another way of thinking how those percentiles are given. We don't have that slide here, but you're seeing the trends from one student group to the next, 1 year to the next. I think the last part I'm going to say about this is you have a lot of students represented on these charts for IAR because you have all the students in 3rd grade through 8th grade. When we look at something like SAT later, you're only looking at students in 11th grade. So it's a much smaller subset. Sometimes you see more of a dramatic shift from 1 year to the next. Okay. We also wanted to compare, bless you. We also wanted to compare and look at our student groups. Again, you saw this last time. We went slide by slide through the different student groups. These are the 5 different student groups that are identified in our school designations. So that's why we pulled this information. So the all is representing all students, the overall group. We have some schools with that designation, as well as we have the performance of Black students, students with disabilities, English learners, and low income. So just a couple of highlights there. We're nearing or exceeding proficiency levels prior to COVID for all 5 of those students groups. We're on our path toward recovery. Now we want to continue to accelerate that growth and accelerate our performance over what we were during that needs assessment in the initial stages of the strategic plan. We've seen significant improvement in the percentage of students not meeting. As you look at the graphs on the left side there, the percentage of students in the red continues to decrease in all 5 groups. And we're very proud of that. We're seeing growth not just for students moving from yellow to green or being proficient, but really throughout the system. And so that's a big celebration that we have there with ELA. But we continue to see large disparities between our district average, the all group on the left, and the 4 student groups listed on the right. And that's the work that we're compelled to do. Last time we brought this chart for you with ELA for grades 6, 7, and 8 because we talked very specifically about detracking and the impact of detracking. And we wanted to talk about, well, what are we seeing in the data as we don't look at different years of students, but now we can start looking at a cohort of students, how they've grown from one year to the next as they move through our system. So from 3rd grade, the students who that in 2022, that's the 21-22 school year, the students who are in 3rd grade, we had 45% of our students in the red, not meeting, rather than the orange and yellow partially meeting or almost meeting. And then 23.7% of 3rd graders meeting or exceeding. As they became 4th graders, that percentage of students not meeting dropped dramatically. You can see it go down to 28.6, and a steady increase of students meeting and exceeding 27.4. And then when they're in 5th grade, we had a similar number of students in the not meeting, but we maintained that percentage, and more growth up to 29.1% of students meeting and exceeding. So part of what we look at in our program is how is our program impacting a cohort of students, not just students from one year to the next. We want to follow them throughout their education to see how they're performing and what else they might need within the curriculum. That's part of our program evaluation. So we showed you these slides as well last time. I'm going to pass it over here to Janelle and David, but as we look at ELA, again, a lot of what you already saw, we want you to see that this isn't something that just happened with 6th through 8th grade. It really is part of our story from 3rd through 8th grade. So with that, Janelle, would you add anything to the elementary story?
I think, one of the things, sorry,
And don't take a whole lot of time because you don't feel well and your voice is about gone, so.
I know, it is. But it's important to be
Happens when you're
here.
working with kids every day.
I think one of the big things with the ELA piece is that we really are seeing some growth with the change. I mean, we've had our CKLA in 1 year, so we've tested with it just 1 year. But the year before that, we redid our ELA blocks so that we really had a more focused approach to our foundational skills as well as to our writing block. So we really shift things up. So the last 2 years, as you can see, we're kind of seeing it may not be the growth that we want to see because we want to see that exponential growth, right? That huge growth, but we are seeing movement, and that's in really just 1 year with the real program, 2 years with just the adjustment of how we are approaching our taking foundational skills as separate, and then the comprehension and the writing and pairing those together, because that's a very different move than what we previously had done. I was actually just watching a podcast or listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about 3 to 5 years before you're really going to see that difference when you've incorporated more of a science of reading approach, because the kids who are really getting that huge change of instruction are currently in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And so we have to give that time. But I mean, things are looking promising for some of the assessments that we're giving in those primary grades. We're actually seeing some trends that are extremely promising, and we just hope to continue that. But we also know that takes teacher buy-in, it takes professional development, it takes time and making sure that we give teachers what they need to be able to support kids in really developing those foundational skills that we haven't necessarily been emphasizing the same way before.
Thank you, Janelle. And David, for middle school?
Yeah, so you all saw this slide in November when we presented. There's nothing new on the slide. Just a reminder, though, of some of the things that are in process. When we think about middle school ELA, we're piloting new resources this year in Tier 1. So we have a group of teachers that just switched curriculum to try their second curriculum this year. So shout out to them and all the hard work. It is extremely hard to try one new curriculum, let alone multiple in a year. Shout out to Gary Slotnick, who part of our department is leading that group. Today we met with freshman and sophomore teachers, and I'll talk about that a bit more on the next slide. But some other things we're doing, we're piloting a 90-minute ELA period where we're strengthening the reading and writing connection at the middle level. So rather than having them separate with two separate curriculum, we're pushing them together and trying to see if we can strengthen the reading and writing connection there. We're piloting a new resource and intervention at the middle level for reading intervention. So those kiddos who are coming to us struggling, maybe with foundational skills, hopefully we're going to be able to catch them up a little bit. So that's something new we're trying. And then if you didn't know, middle school ELA is a long-term or a hard-to-fill position right now. So if you can help us recruit English teachers, we would love that, especially middle school certified English teachers. I'm sure Ken's department would gladly welcome some applications there.
Ken, do we have a website or a phone number?
Yes, we do, and it is actually on our hard-to-fill position list in all seriousness, and so we do have a higher rate of pay for that position. We have for a couple years. We also have, that's one of the options, so we pay tuition for existing teachers to go back and get endorsements, and that's one of the areas we are specifically targeting for that as well. So if you're an existing educator who's interested in that, we have some pathways for that as well.
Yep, and we've got some incredible long-term subs that we're hoping we can get into programs to get certified so we can keep them.
And one who was mentioned earlier this evening who is part of an alternative program who we are working to help get certified. So there's a lot of positive things happening on that front.
Yeah, and just so that we don't think, right, we highlighted this one cohort last time, but if you look at the cohort coming after them, you see growth there too. So our current 8th grade students in 6th grade, they were in 2023, right? They were in 6th grade. They were at 22.2% proficient then. In 7th grade, 2024, we got them up to 25.3 proficient. Again, y'all, 1 out of 4 kids isn't enough for us, but it's that growth. And it's not like we picked one cohort that looked good for us and said we're going to highlight that, right? We're seeing that growth again. And we're seeing it, if you remember from November, across student groups. So Black students, white students, Hispanic students, Asian students, students with disabilities, and English learners all had that cohorted growth when we highlighted those boxes in November. Then when you look at high school, we got some really good feedback after our last presentation. One of the things that as we detrack that we probably could have done a better job messaging is like when we detracked sophomore year, our team of teachers that came together to look at that really said, we want this to be an AP Prep for All experience, right? This isn't about lowering standards. This is about how do we make sure we offer access and opportunity to all students so that they all feel ready for that opportunity junior year to take AP Lang, right? And so we could have done a better job messaging that as we detracked, but it really was about how do we keep what's in our AP Prep sophomore English class and then offer supports and scaffolds for students who may not be ready for that level of rigor yet, right? And what we heard from our community, if you heard it during public comment last time, is that's not the experience our kids are having. So we went right back with that right away. Conversations today, as we talked about freshman and sophomore, both freshman and sophomore teams have done lit analysis papers already this semester, so we can tell you that it's happening. We're making sure we're taking that feedback from the community, making sure that we've got the things in place. Even the freshman team said today is like, we don't do enough research genre writing, right? So let's look at how do we increase that? So as we look at new resources, we got really promising feedback today from our freshman and sophomore teams that maybe we're landing on a resource that we really like, which I'm excited about. We're continuing to revisit those conversations about rigor, specifically around writing expectations. And the feedback from the community is vital. It's the only way we get better is by, reflecting. If you look at our data from 2024, it is the first year we're below the state in a while, and we certainly own that, right? Like, we don't want that to be a long thing. So hopefully, as we showed you in November, we believe this current group of juniors, they were 5 percentage points more proficient as sophomores than that group. So we believe that bounce back is coming in ELA. And we also highlighted the increased enrollment in our AP and dual credit classes. So continue to get that college prep experience for our students. One of the big changes we have to make, if you weren't aware, Illinois is going from the SAT now to the ACT. So we have to think about how do we help our juniors get ready for the ACT and the kind of questions that are going to be in passages that are going to be there. And so that's one of the big tasks ahead of us here as we get ready for that test this spring.
David, could you also tell us a little bit about the SAT college readiness benchmark compared to ISB's benchmark?
I would love to. So ISB set the benchmark for their assessment at 540. SAT sets it at 480. So again, as Dr. Boozer was saying, like, ISB's looking at that because what we know is we're telling a lot of kids in Illinois that they're not proficient when the SAT College Board is saying they are, right? In our district last year, looking at the data, it is about 20% of our kids that, according to Illinois' benchmark, aren't proficient, but SAT would say they are. And so hopefully Illinois is going to norm that a little bit better. Again, according to NWEA, MAP testing, we're the highest in the country as far as our academic benchmarks, which great, but we're also telling a lot of families and students that their kids aren't academically prepared when they are. So that's kind of, we look for that norm, especially as we go to ACT for ISB to kind of normalize that a bit better.
All right.
This is a slide that we didn't show last time. So this one is a bit new, so I'll just highlight a couple things here. This is when we look at those 5 student groups for SAT, specifically ELA. You'll see similar performance last year as this year. When you look at these student groups, when again, our kind of first measuring stick is let's get back to where we were in 2019. So if you look at Black students, we are at 8.8% proficient this year. In 2019, we are at 9.0, so we're right there, pretty close. Our children with disabilities, even though they went back in proficiency a little bit this year, are still higher than they were in 2019. So that's a group that we use the term recovery a lot when we talk about coming back from COVID. That's a group that is higher than they were in 2019. And then our English learners and our students who qualify as low income, we're still almost back to where we were in 2019, but not quite there. Again, in our district, we have large disparities, trying to close those opportunity gaps, make sure kids have access to our most rigorous experiences. So those are data points that we're going to keep trying to impact.
All right, thank you, David. And so I mentioned the ECRA group and the comparative reports that they provide us with to our peer districts. And it puts the green line at the top as the state average that you saw for ELA. And one thing the ECRA group does to help give us a district summary of where we are as a district is they combine the IAR, the 3 through 8, with the SAT grade 11. So it puts it all together and an overall proficiency percentage based on the different data points that we've been showing you or that you might be able to find on the school report card. These percentages are not available publicly on the report card, but it is part of our partnership they have with the state, that the ECRA group has with the state, that they can pull the data, across those, and provide us different analytics, different reports. And it shows that the state average is at 39.4, Unit 4's ELA average is at 28.8% proficient, and that peer average is at 16.6 for that Central Illinois LUDA district comparison. Okay, we're going to go through a similar dive into the math data. Again, we weren't able to do that last time, so please let us know if you have any questions. But before we do, were there any questions about ELA? Okay, so we'll dive into the math. With our math rates, again, it's the same sort of summary report. What you're looking at here is IAR. This is students who are in 3rd through 8th grade taking the MAP assessment. Sorry, I said MAP, the math assessment. And what you see for the pretty consistently here, and we adopted a lot of new math curriculum during the distance learning point right after COVID. We also knew that we had a high priority on literacy and we needed a strong focus on literacy. And our teachers were adjusting to a lot of different components in education. And so we're seeing a lot of consistency from year to year. We're not seeing the growth that you were seeing in ELA with math. You're not really seeing it from the state either. So I think there's been a lot of maintaining of where we are as a state with math and as a district, because across the state we have a really strong focus and a need to be focused on helping all students to read and write. Ideally by third grade, but to help support some of those literacy gaps that students have as a result of distance learning and the impact of COVID. And so that's not an excuse, it's just an observation that we have. Our goal is to continue to talk about math and to help support it. We're so proud of our work with the Building Thinking Classrooms, some innovative practices to help students engage with math. And I'm sure David's going to be able to talk a lot more about that. He's helping to lead that work at the secondary level. But we're also helping our elementary teachers to support that balance between right now, a 75-minute plus math block and a 120-plus minute ELA block in their school day, and learning to balance the needs of our students and the learning that they're doing. And so it's a huge celebration and shout out to our teachers in trying to learn a lot of new content. They're very excited about it. They're asking us a lot of questions. And we still have a lot more work to do, but we have a lot more work to do to support them in this effort. And so with that, Janelle, would you add anything just overall about math?
I think one of the things that has bogged us down a bit, we adopted during COVID. So when we came back to distance learning, we took what should be a 60 to 75-minute program and put it into a 35-minute block. And people developed bad habits. Then we went straight into the ELA adoption because we were trying to stay ahead of where we knew the state was going with the science of reading. And now I think some of this is compounded with math. And so we're really trying to bring back that math and getting back to how the program that we did adopt was intended to be used. And so the past 2 years, we've really spent a lot of time making sure that people understand the solve and share, which is a piece where student inquiry is a huge component of that, where kids are able to have the problem and try to figure out how they would get that, to kind of build that background knowledge, and then a little further development into, and this is how we can do this, and the lesson from there. So it gives them a lot of experience in attempting the skill that we're trying to do to really get a grasp on what they know and don't know, and then just trying to make sure that we do have all the pieces that we need to move forward with math. So it's something that we are trying to definitely strengthen, and we'll be doing a lot more with that as we continue to really analyze why our scores look like they do. One thing I do want to say, though, that I think is really a plus in elementary math and ELA is that we're seeing that floor raise up, because that's a huge piece, and that's sometimes the hardest piece, is to make sure that your students that are struggling the most are making the move forward. And that is what we're seeing in math and ELA. It may not be by leaps and bounds, but it is a nice, steady raising of the floor, and that's a really good thing.
And the data supports that, Janelle. As we look at the students who are not meeting in the red, those numbers continue to improve year after year since 2019. Even though we're not seeing the percentages of increasing as rapidly or as much as we would hope in the meeting and proficiency green areas, that steady improvement speaks to exactly what you're talking about, and that's true for the middle level as well, David. So what we did is we took that overall group, or all student group, repeated it on the left, and then looked at our student groups, again, that are aligned with the work that we need to do with school improvement for the school designations. and gave you a summary of the year after year trends, very similar to what you were seeing on the first slide, as far as some slight growth there in the percentage of students meeting and exceeding, pretty steady trends with fewer students in that red category of the not meeting section, so steady improvement across student groups there, as well as you saw on the initial slide. So with that, I just repeat a little bit of the same trend that we looked at, not only from one year to the next, but when we look at grade level by cohort, the same kids that are with us from one year to the next in 2022, we see a strong improvement from 35.5% of students in the red to 33.7% to 27% of students in the red. And that is a celebration. That is a significant, there's a lot of work that goes into that. If the numbers stayed the same, kids still had to grow. The test gets harder every year. So this is what we would call accelerated growth. We're hoping to see that as in the green in all areas, as well as we did in ELA. We saw that accelerated growth across all student groups, across all proficiency levels in ELA. And so we're intervening, we're supporting students who need us the most and the most help, and we're seeing some positive trends there. We still have to go back and help our students or our teachers keep that balance between all the different responsibilities that they carry every day and what are the tools they need to help continue to support all kids. We're maintaining, they're growing to maintain those numbers. There's a success there in the maintenance. Those numbers aren't declining as significantly, but again, work to do. David, and Janelle, do you want to jump in here more specifically? Sorry, this is David's slide.
I'm happy to share. Okay, so when we look at 6-8, we'll look at this just a little bit deeper since it's a new slide. You see that with this cohort of kids, again, 16.3% of kids were proficient in 2022 as sixth graders. We increased that to 22.1 as eighth graders. So we are seeing in this case, almost 6% of kids more proficient by the time they leave our middle schools than where they started at the end of sixth grade. Just a couple notes there. Our sixth grade group, 20% of kids proficient. That is higher than we were in 2019. So again, when we talk about recovery, is 20% enough for us? No, right? But we are in sixth grade above where we were in 2019 before COVID hit. Eighth grades at 22.1, that was a 4.9% increase over 2023. So I want to see 4.9% increases everywhere, or even bigger, right? Like that's a pretty big jump for a year. So we're excited about that. When you look at the cohort here with our student groups as well, you see growth. Black students went up 3.7% proficient, Asian 7.5% higher, Hispanic 5% higher, white 8.3% higher, multiracial 15.5% higher. Children with disabilities, 3.7% higher. So you're seeing the growth from 16 to 22 happens in a lot of our student groups as well. Again, as Mike alluded to, we're in year 3 of our illustrative math adoption with Alex. So illustrative math is our core tier 1. That's grade level instruction. Alex is our individualized kind of digital tool that's going to assess kids at the beginning and then give them the lessons that they need in order to close that gap between where they are in grade level instruction. And so we have that for every single one of our middle school kids, and then we also have it for our Algebra 1 geometry and Algebra 2 students. Shout out to Dr. Ward. So a couple years ago, Dr. Ward and I had a little brainstorm about what can we do, and I said, let's bring in some building thinking classrooms work, and Dr. Ward made it happen. And we've done that now for 2 years, and that's really where, just a quick conversation Dr. Ward ran with, and now if any of you want to visit, I would love to take you. We've had the U of I visit. We've had the ROE visit. We now had CU Schools visit. Shout out to them for their partnership. They told me last week that they are our biggest cheerleaders. And man, that feels really good to hear, right? But I would love to show you. It's just incredible work. Shout out to Emily Walsh, the math instructional coach there at Central. She's run multiple professional development sessions for us on building thinking classrooms, partnered with the Center for Education in Small Urban Communities through the U of I to run book studies with them. So really cool stuff happening there. but hopefully we're going to continue to see growth and get more of our kids proficient. Again, proficiency is only 7.5% of our summative designation. So when you think about growth there, we're still hovering in that, mid-40s range. We want to get that as a start above 50th percentile, but then I think we want to compete with ourselves and not necessarily just say we're better than other people. So I think that's our goal, right?
And I know Jonelle has some pretty exciting ideas with the success that we're seeing with some software like Alex at the secondary level, some software that we might need at the elementary level to help supplement and support each and every student in math. And so, Jonelle, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, that's one of the pieces that really is missing in the math program is we didn't adopt that piece because at the time we were looking at the budget that we had as well as the very limited time span that we had. And so this is a piece that we feel is really missing. We are starting to see some of our elementary people are starting to use the same math processes with the stand-up math, and that's been exciting to have them share that. Casey Kashnik over at Carrie Busey, he's been excited about doing that and been sharing that with the math leaders. And so that's another piece that we're able to see, and it's a natural piece that fits into our program because of that whole the beginning, which is a very inquiry approach, and this is a great way to incorporate that. So it's already there. It's just more of a different approach to doing it. But that digital piece is a piece that we need to invest in and really to kind of help with some of that differentiation, some of those gaps that kids have that maybe just haven't quite been fixed from COVID.
All right, excellent. David?
You can go to the next slide for me, buddy. Thank you. Okay, so when we look at SAT, again, not a big part of our summative designation at the high school level, but 25.4% of kids proficient. The state was at 26.1%. So again, it is the first time. Up until last year, you see our trajectory, we were growing more kids proficient, while the state has slowly each year had less kids proficient up until last year. So we're going to own that. We're going to work at it. We're going to hopefully change that trajectory to where we bounce back next year. Our current juniors were 1% higher on the PSAT 10, 1% more proficient. So hopefully there is a bounce back. We were 0.7% less than the state. So you take that 1%, hopefully next year we're back above that. Again, a lot of the work this year is around what's the ACT going to ask our juniors to do. This isn't a snapshot of all of our high school kids. It's a snapshot of one group, right, our juniors. So how do we make sure that those kids feel really confident and prepared headed into that test next spring? The other note, if you would just head to the next slide, is this is our largest group of students in the lowest kind of category in the red, and we haven't seen that in many of our data sets. We've talked a lot about how the group in the red is getting smaller and smaller. In this case, this is our largest group, so we're trying to think about how are we making sure that our students who are coming in not working on grade level, we're accelerating their growth and we're not somehow getting more kids into that group. So we're going to keep thinking about that. A couple smaller celebrations here. Our black students are the highest they've been since 2019, the most proficient they've been since 2019. Our children with disabilities, again, like you saw earlier, they're more proficient than they were in 2019. So we're continuing to see that recovery trend when we think about comparing where we are now to where we were right before the pandemic hit.
Okay, and this is our next ECRA group slide that just gives you that comparison and combination of IAR proficiency rates along with, combined with the SAT rates for math. The state average at 27.9%, Unit 4 at 22.7%, and that peer average at 9.8%. The last core content area that's measured by Illinois is the Illinois Science Assessment, known as the ISA. It's only given in grades 5, 8, and 11. One note is that this is the last year the ISA is going to be given to, or last year was the last year it was given to 11th graders, because it will now be part of the ACT score. And so the metrics will change again for 11th graders along with that SAT change. But to take a look at that, one of the things that we can see is from in the 4 years that are posted, it doesn't go back to 2019 on the state report card, so that's why we're only showing 4 years here. But in those 4 years, the percentage of students in the red have gone down 7.1 points, and increased students at the proficiency level 8.5 percentage points. Okay. If we want to take a look at that again with our 5 different student groups, that we see the growth and percentage of all student groups meeting and exceeding since 2021. So that has continued to increase for all of our student groups. And we're seeing that trend of the reduction in the percentage of students at the emerging level. So for the science assessment, they call it the red, the emerging level, not meeting. A big highlight I think that we have here in this report is the percentage of black students in that emerging level went down, in the red level, went down 17.2 points since 2021 and increased in proficiency rates by 10.8%. For our low-income student group, the percentage of students in the red went down 20 points since 2021 and increased in meeting and exceeding rates by 19 points. So some dramatic shifts there over the last 4 years, especially in those 2 student groups. Okay, our last ECRA report here is giving us a summary of 3 other factors, and these are only for the high school. So the high school gives a percentage of the overall ranking for 9th grade on track. That's in the purple. And you see the trends over from 2019 to 2024 over on the left chart on the left, on the bottom left. And then for high school 4-year graduation rate, we are displaying that in the ECRA report alongside our peer school districts, as well as a comparison to the state. And then our Unit 4, 4-year graduation rate trends from school year 19 to last school year SY 24. Okay, and so one of the things that the third row also looks at students enrolled in college within the first 12 months of graduation. And so here we're going to say we are above the state value, the state percentage there, and proud of that. You'll see in the orange number next to our orange column that that's just slightly down from where it was last year, just under 0.5% there. But you are going to see an increase in our 4-year graduation rate by 1.9% from last year. You'll also see the steady growth from SY 22 to 23 to 24. It is also, last year was just slightly higher than we were even before COVID in our 4-year graduation rate. So that's just giving you context about what does 81.9 mean? You know, to what extent, how does that compare to other districts? How does it compare to the state? How does it compare to our own trends? We're trying to give you all that information on the right side, as well as 9th grade on track. 9th grade on track is a newer designation, and it's the state sets that guidance. If you fail more than 1 semester of a core class, then you are no longer considered on track. We have a lot in Unit 4 to help with credit recovery so that we know and we believe that even if you fail more than 1 semester of a core class, we can get you back on track. That's part of our responsibility. We want to be a redemptive school district and find different ways to help support students. That's through summer programming, but it's also through some other credit recovery options that we offer throughout the year. And so one of the things that really stood out to us as we were looking at cohorts of students or a group of students is we know in that right after COVID, that 2021 distance learning year, we only had 60% of those students, those 9th graders, during distance learning on track. That means that almost 40% of our students during distance learning had more than 1 semester, an F, more than 1 semester. So they had a year's worth or 2 semesters of Fs or more in core classes in 2021. And we still had that graduating class, that class of 2024, still had the highest graduation rate that we've had over the last 3 years. It's a tribute to them and their perseverance and their commitment to continue to recoup and recover those credits. And to earn those credits, it's also a real celebration to our staff, our administrators, really, and the whole team to go all in to see this is a major need, this is a crisis, what else can we do to help support our students? And so as you look from year to year, we can see in 2022, still coming back from COVID, our first year back in person, fully in person, we had 68% of our students on track. That's 32% of our students who were not considered on track based on that guidance. And we're confident that we'll be at least where we were, if not even higher. Our goal is higher for a graduation rate for the class of 2025. But you're seeing more and more students on track. It's a very rigorous mark. But David shared some data with you last time that we know with the research across the country that when students are on track in 9th grade, they're 4 times more likely to graduate. And that's our goal. And to keep growing that number from 60 to 68 to 72, this is very promising. And we're excited about where we are, but we still have a long way to go. And that's one of the themes that you're hearing. But we believe the different pieces that we've put in place, the investments you all have made and that our teachers have made are paying off. We're seeing those trends, and some of these trends are hard to shift. They take a long time, as John L. said, sometimes 3, 4, 5 years before we're really getting to where we want to be. You're seeing the trends. Again, still a long way to go. David, anything you'd say here about this?
I'll go ahead and let Ms. Vasquez get in.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. For anybody listening, or those of us even listening in the room, who are just maybe it's a nomenclature question, but you use the phrase semester, and our high schools are measured in quarters. So, no?
No, our high schools are measured by semesters. The credits
Measured
earned
by
on the
semesters,
semester.
but they have midpoint. So
Yes.
it's one, but it is still one semester.
Yes.
Even though there are midpoints in this semester, it is in that August through December, January through May timeframe.
Yeah,
Even
so
though there are grade points within that.
Yes, exactly. So we believe it's really important that you as a family are made aware of your child's progress, right? And so we send that 3 times every semester, an update, an interim progress report, we call it, probably comes digitally to your email. And then what we do is we take that data right now, and we've got, we're tracking every single true freshman that we have, because this data is based upon kids who entered 9th grade this year. We're tracking every single one of those kids to say, if the semester ended today, would they be on track or not? And if they're not, what courses are they not being successful in? And what's the support that we're providing to wrap around that student and get them back on track, right? And so it's the January grade at the end of the day that matters for this. But we're hopeful that you as families, that students take those interim progress reports and say, like, hey, is what I'm doing cutting it right now, or do I need to step up my game to make sure I pass the class? And that's honestly, as we talk about PACE framework in a minute, helping our 8th graders to 9th graders understand the credit system is one of the biggest tasks that we're still trying to figure out. Like, students, I don't think, understand that if you don't earn your credits 5 by the end of freshman year, you repeat that freshman year again, because that's not a system we use anywhere else, right? That credit-bearing system. And so we're trying to constantly communicate that. Shout out to our counselors for the incredible work they do, especially as our kids are signing up for courses right now. So hopefully families are having conversations around hey, kiddo, what's your educational goals? What's your career goals? And how do we select classes that best fit that for you? But it really comes down to the biggest change we've made this year is we're now tracking every single 9th grade student, and our buildings know who, if the semester ended today, who would be on track and who wouldn't be on track, so that they can target supports to those kids who wouldn't be. And we'll keep doing that. And hopefully we're going to see even a larger jump here, because that's just not something that we've had the capacity for in the past. The other thing I'll say, we looked up today, our true 9th grade chronic absenteeism rate is 35%. So 9th grade parents, please help your kiddos get to school, because once they're here, we're great when they're here. So please help them come.
Yep. Our teachers say the number one factor in students' success, right, is attendance. And when they're not here, it really creates some big challenges for them. And we have systems that we can put in place to help support kids, but we need them here for them to be their best and for us to be our best.
May I
Just a little
add,
plug.
there is I'm
There's
sorry.
It's not transportation at high school.
Absolutely not. They're MTD. And I would like to add to that, we've even charted some data to show the correlation between attendance and grades. When they are here, they earn. They earn. We're not giving them anything. They're earning really good grades when they are here on a daily basis. If I can put into perspective, we have approximately 1,000 freshmen. So with an overall attendance rate of 78% amongst our freshmen, that means there's like 200 freshmen. Where are they? Right? So it has to become uncommon for us as a community to see 15-year-olds around town between the hours of 8 o'clock and 3 p.m. It has to become uncommon. And as a community entirely, we have to stand as a community and say, we really need every student in school every day. And I promise we'll be great when they get there. But it's going to take all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Harden. Janelle?
I think we have to remember this doesn't start at high school. This starts in kindergarten and first grade and pre-K, and making sure your kids get there every day and as close to being on time as possible, because there is learning that starts from the minute they get in to the minute they leave. So when you pick your child up early, when you bring your child late, those things affect their learning experience. And again, those patterns are developed in kindergarten. So just think about that and the impact that has. So those freshmen on track, not on track. The ones on track started in kindergarten with good attendance habits. The ones not on track probably started, if you went back, you would see kindergarten, first grade with poor attendance. And so, making sure that this is a priority, because it really does affect their future.
And we also want to recognize that it's, graduation is an important event for sure, but it's not just about four-year graduation rates. We're going to celebrate our students who graduate in 5 years or 6 years or however long it takes them to graduate. I also want to celebrate Orlando and his team for the work that we're doing to help support students in earning their GEDs. That does not count towards our graduation rates, but we've been growing a variety of programs to help students leave high school or leave Unit 4 with the tools, the certifications, and the degrees that are going to help them be most successful. And it's not only about four-year graduation rates here just because we're putting it on this slide. Dr. Ward, would you take the next slide?
I will. And it's exciting because everybody's in on this conversation about graduation, right? Because we want all of our students to graduate. And we have just recently launched a campaign. I'm going to tell you about it as soon as I cover this slide really quickly. So the overview is this. We've increased our graduation rate for all of our students by 1.9%. And our rates for our multilingual learners is up 5 percentage points more. So we're going in the right direction. Here's our areas for growth. Our graduation rate for students with disability has decreased by 8 points. Now, if students need to have another academic year, that's fine. But for students who are not getting through, that don't need that support, we need to get them across the stage as well. So that's our opportunity to dig in deep and to go across departments. And we've been doing a lot of that, as you can see. And then I know we talked about the other districts and where we might be higher than all but one. We're still below the state. And even though we want to do our best and compete against ourselves, we also want to compete against the state. we want to be better, and I think that's a commitment to our team. We moved from 60% of students being on track in 9th grade to 81% being on track and graduating. That is a commitment to our teachers. If you read the bulletins that go out from the high school principals, they're doing lunch groups, they're giving help and support during advisory, there's after-school supports. And then our systems of supports are meeting some of those people there because they have personalized relationships with students. So they're sitting with them after school and in lunch groups. When you talk about OPHOP and other places like that, athletics. So we're trying to meet them there. We also just launched the Portrait of a Graduate, where we talk about what does a graduate look like to our community? Because for the students who aren't coming to school, we have to ask them, what is it that you need? What is it that you're aiming for? What is it that you want? All students may not want to go to college, but if you want to go to careers, if you want to pursue something non-traditional, be an entrepreneur, we're asking them, what do you need? And we're asking our community, what do you need? If you are a business owner, what do you see as our graduates? What are our community values? So that is something that we began a couple of years ago, and then we backtracked. We went the opposite way. We said, you know what, let's map out the framework. Let's talk about the experiences that students need so they can make some firm, conscientious decisions. And that's where you see the college tours. You see students doing the interest surveys. You see them doing a lot of other pieces where they're trying to figure out, who am I? And where am I going? And then you see school links. That's the framework that helps us sort of suck all that information up and keep metrics on where are our students, who's not on track. Now our counselors can send a message to parents and students to say, you missed 2 classes. If you don't get too far behind, you don't feel so frustrated. For a lot of our students, they don't feel like they can be redeemed. And we are a redemptive society, so we want to say, if you miss 1 class, you blew it, you have an opportunity to make that up. Don't let that go on 2 and 3 and 4 years, because that's when we see a lot of hopelessness. So, we've been really stretching across departments. Dr. Boozer pushed us all around and reorganized us a little bit. I didn't think it would be nice to be back on the school side. It is nice to be back on the school side and talking with TNL, IT, MLL, SPED, like everybody's in the conversation, because the bottom line is we want to be great. Other than that, what are we showing up for? But we got to have our students believe that. And so when you get the email about the campaign, about what you see and what you want in the portrait of a graduate, we want to ask the students, not do school to them, but we also want to ask our community so that it doesn't feel like just internally we're making all those decisions. Because you're parents, you're business owners, we have university staff, we have a lot of people here that should be painting that portrait with us. And we pulled portraits from, where was it, Dan? Niles, New Trier, Stevenson, Adelaide, because we are just as great as those other districts. And we looked at their attributes and we said, well, who are we in Champaign? And what is it that we are producing when you walk through our doors? So that's a campaign that's launching between CCR and all of our other departments. That's how we're going to try to get around the data and change what those outcomes and percentages are. Because we believe that we went from 60 to 80 as a result of COVID. We can go from 80 to 90 plus as a result of some more intentional efforts in aligning our work. So, this slide could be sort of a dismal slide, but we know the work that's going on behind the scenes to make sure we repaint the narrative. Yep. And we're going to need your help, so that's going to be coming out.
Dr. Ward, I'm glad you said that, because the one thing I do not want to do is make our folks in the buildings doing this hard work, our staff, our principals, our teachers doing this hard work, feel less than and to feel underappreciated. There's a lot that goes into this, and I commend them for this, because this is hard work, but it's also heart's work. And we have to continue pushing and encouraging our staff to keep moving in the right direction. Incremental growth, incremental growth. So when I hear people say our schools are failing, our schools are dismal, all the way when it's at, I have to come back with, no, we have a lot of work to do. So it's going to take all of us to roll up our sleeves. And where are you in the process? Are you helping us or are you hindering us? And if you're hindering us, bye-bye, help us out, because we have work to do and our kids deserve better, and so do our staff.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm your number 1 cheerleader.
Yep.
Yeah. We had the conversation with our principals, and we started the conversation there. And when we talked about Adelaide Stevenson, some of the people in the room were like, well, are they like us? I mean, I think that's a question you always get. Do the demographics match? Do the resources match? All those other pieces. And we talked about their story, that they were a very kind of diverse and separate community. And they have these facilities where they have rooms that spin around and they become theaters. You don't have to even move. And they got all of these, nice, phenomenal bricks and mortar, but they didn't have the collective buy-in. And they said, we don't want to be about this. Come visit us, come see the space, do the PLC work here, but understand our story. And so we use that as a way to say that, yeah, we got a lot of competing interests going on here, but we all have something in common. We're all trying to get somewhere, and we're trying to get our children there. So we're going to use that and leverage that as our strength, instead of seeing it as a divide or a deficit to what we have here. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ward, and thank you, Dr. Boozer. And also, board, thank you for the time to help us tell our story. It's easy to come up and say, here's a snapshot of any one year, here are our trends, but we're trying to use the data to help tell our story and how we use it to inform our work. And so we appreciate this time. Yes.
Just a couple other things. I know you and we talked about it. One of the things that I think is not really expressed enough is the impact that COVID has had on different groups. So, for example, the kids in 5th grade now were in 2nd or 3rd grade, and that's when you're learning how to read. So looking at that, are there any areas, because I've noticed that we follow state trends. For example, the junior class SAT scores we were a little worse than the state average decline, but the state declined. So are there any areas that we've isolated out where we're doing better than the state average, or we're following different, or worse, that we need to really hone in on?
Yes, I think great question. I think it's something that we need to consider further. I think even just looking at, the difference in grad rate, like where the state was last year, their growth, it looks to me really small print, so even my young eyes can't see well. But I think we outpace that, right? In some ways, we need to. Because we're behind, right? In that metric, we're below where the state is. So in a lot of ways, we don't just need staying on pace with the state's growth. We need to accelerate our growth. But it's a really great question for us to ask, like, where are we outpacing? Where's our growth accelerated compared to the state? And we're closing that gap between us and the state. And where, like, again, you said SAT, like, yes, the state came back, but we came back even further. We believe that rebound's coming, but let's hope the state's rebound isn't bigger than ours,
One of the things that we found last year with our 4th and 5th grade starting this new curriculum is that we really had some major deficit in their foundational skills, which was affecting their ability to read and write. And as we saw that and we listened and heard the teachers, we made some major accommodations with testing to figure out what is it that the kids were really deficit in, and then how to address that, and how to look at your class as to, is this half my class? Is this a third of my class? Is this majority of my class? And how can I use that intervention time to address it most efficiently? And and we still saw some growth with our 4th and 5th grade. So that was a really exciting place and thing to see. I do think some of our younger kids, some of our 3rd, 2nd, 1st grades, I think there's something different that we're seeing with them that's maybe not as measurable, and that's in that social emotional learning piece and just their I've been in a 2nd grade classroom a lot lately, and it's sometimes just like being in kindergarten with some of the social emotional of they want to touch you and pet your leg, and which is fine, but it's things you expect to see in kindergarten, not in 2nd grade, and some of their interactions with each other, speech patterns, some things like that we're seeing, I think in part because they were in pre-K during that time and they didn't have normal pre-K experiences. An online pre-K experience is not what was needed, and it was what we had. But there's going to be things like that affect some of those kids that we have to think about in how we instruct, how we manage our day, how we help support those kids as they go up through the system.
Yep. Thank you, Janelle. And I think one of the things we're really excited to follow is our K2 data with MAP, especially with the major shifts in reading instruction that we've had. We can compare that data to our own. Right? Where were we? Are we seeing not just the traditional growth that we've seen, but are we seeing the accelerated growth that we're hoping to see? And so one of the tools I've referenced a few times is our partnership with the ECRA Group. And one of our last slides is talking about the predictive analytics that they're able to give us, the new reports that they're able to give us, the program evaluation tools that will help us dig into answer some of those questions that we just haven't had the right tools to do. Especially with everything else we've been trying to balance. And so that meeting that Ron and I had last week was really exciting to be able to think about how do we take our question and use technology to help us answer it, and not just our own brains and time. And so they're going to be really dynamic partners in moving forward. So I already gave away part of our last slide, but Ms. Holder, that works really well to answer your question. We need better tools to help us do the work. Okay, and so Suzanne.
Yes, so this is an area that definitely we can work to catch up with the state. So we have one more data point to share with you this evening, and we wanted to share this because last November, as Dr. Boozer noted, when we did this presentation, we did have some questions and some follow-up regarding the alternate assessment. So hopefully you saw some really great growth and positivity for children with disabilities and IEPs in that IIR data. We have relative strength for students with disabilities in math and science, and so that's awesome. We do have an alternate assessment. So Board Member Holder, you were asking about that in regards to our multilingual learners. So in special education, we do have an alternate assessment. And this assessment has generally been around since 2014, 15 school year. Used to be we could turn in portfolios of student work, and it was really awesome because students were scored on the growth that they could show. Now students are taking the DLM, which stands for the Dynamic Learning Maps Alternate Assessment. And this is an adaptive, computer-based assessment for our students with the most cognitive delays, the most significant cognitive delays. So when we're talking about it's a state question, we need to lobby the state. Dr. Boozer, what is it, Vision 2030? This is a very difficult task for our students who typically attend our FLS classrooms, our essential skills classrooms, and those are, of course, at our high schools, our middle schools, and 3 of our elementaries, and we have students in about 5 other elementary buildings, too, that take this computer test. It is a one-on-one assessment. So the teacher sits with a student. Very long assessment, can take up to half a day to a day to complete. Our students have to take this assessment for ELA. Math is next. They also take it for science. And they have to respond essentially with yes/no responses, sometimes through a switch, through a nod, through a tracking, eye tracking. So sometimes even the communication for our students is difficult. Oftentimes we can't even get them to begin, let alone sustain the task. So the way that we determine which students take this test, again, is done through the IEP team. So this is an IEP team process, and the state only allows about 1% of our students to take this test. Actually, we exceed that. So this year we had 76 students complete the test. So that's a lot. It's about 1.2% of the percentage of students taking the state assessment with disabilities. So we actually had to write for a waiver, write for a justification. I think that speaks to the concentration of students we have in our essential skills and functional life skills programs, especially. And I want you to know that if a student is here in our district and they're enrolled, no student is exempt from state testing. So if students with disabilities aren't taking the IAR, they are taking this assessment. And again, I don't want to overemphasize, it is a difficult task for our students and our staff. And so we knew from the 2023 data, we needed to try to do something different to get different results for 24. So what we did is we brought our teachers together, we did training with them. There's online training, there's a special portal our teachers are in, and we're disappointed to know that we need to support them more. And so our department is going back, and we're like, okay, we got to get a more detailed plan. There are actual 53 modules, 53, for our teachers to learn to give the DLM. And so we can help them with that. We can do study sessions. There are lesson plans. So there are a lot of things. We've reached out to ISB for support. We're going to reach out directly to DLM too. We are not the only state that uses DLM. And actually, we're quite comparable to some of our ECRA districts. The one that really stuck out to me when I started digging through was Kankakee. Go back and look at that slide. Kankakee also only has like 13% of their enrollment in special ed as well. So we're going to reach out to some of our ECRA neighbors and say, hey, what are some successes for you? We need to get our teachers some more training and support. We know that our results can look better than this. We're not making excuses. Even if it is a difficult task, we're gonna plug through it and try to get some tips. So That's what we have. Oh, and by the way, also, special education teachers are hard to fill positions. And if you sign on now, we have a 5,000 sign-on bonus for those who are watching at 9:20. So like ELA, we have many long-term substitutes. That is no secret. Many of them are great. Many of them are also carrying on to get certification. They're in these positions quite often in our FLS and our ES classrooms as well.
And I would add, just like ELA, this is an area where we're also providing tuition opportunities for existing staff who are looking to add the endorsement. In addition to, actually, I think it might be on the HR changes this evening, we have a number of teacher aides, for example, who completed a program who are going to be special education teachers starting in January. I think there's like 7 or 8 people on the list, if I remember correctly. So, so there are a lot of things happening on that front, but, you know, as Suzanne allotted, as our population has continued to grow, as you've seen on these slides, we need more people in all of the areas, right? And special education, ELA are just 2.
I did want to add one other piece, and I was not trying to read my notes word for word. So we are assessing on the DLM on grade level standards. So if you are in the 11th grade, the DLM is assessing our students with pretty significant cognitive delays on the 11th grade level. So they are assessing on Common Core. So again, it is a challenge.
Thank you, Suzanne. The DLM data is also available on the Illinois report card, but it is not factored into the school designations. And so because we had questions about it last year, we wanted to make sure that we brought that forward, and thank you, Suzanne, for giving us that overview.
And because it is not factored in, we want to make it clear that because it's not factored in, that it's still important to us.
Correct.
Very important to us, because it's not just about what's factored into the school report card. This is very important work.
Excellent. And so as we wrap up, we wanted to go back to the strategic plan, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Ward. This is sort of our heat map, looking at especially priorities 1 and 2, about where are we, how have we aligned our work, everything that you've seen here tonight with, specifically with the strategies listed in the strategic plan. So Dr. Ward, finish us off.
We've talked about several of these things. As Mike mentioned, this is sort of our heat map. So internally, we're always meeting to say, where are we as far as meeting those measures? What do you have? You know, what do you have as far as from your department and your team? So in strategy 1, you talked about a robust curriculum. That's why we're adopting curriculum we think is culturally relevant. You see us going through the adoptions using those rubrics. And in strategy 2, I'm just giving some examples, kind of lightly going over this piece. Y'all can chime in. We have the instructional framework. Why? Because strategy 2 in the strategic plan asks for us to get together and create a framework. Remember, those are the procedures, right? That's how you make the cake. If you want to mix something extra in, that's fine. But there's an art to the practice of teaching, and kids should know what it is that they're trying to learn, what they should master when they walk in, and they should walk out saying, I did that, whether it's at the end of the day or the end of the unit. Strategy 3, being able to create those college and career readiness opportunities. A lot of times students don't know that they want to go to college because they never stepped on foot on the college campus. So getting them out there, or to the industry. We're taking them to business industries and giving them a chance to see what's out there. That PACE framework, you should look at it. It's open to the public. We've put it in front of a lot of our different audiences to say, are we framing and giving the students the opportunities that are necessary for them to make informed decisions? That's published. Strategy 4, that's the curriculum that Janelle spoke about with CKLA, being able to make sure our students have access to a quality core curriculum with the science of reading behind it. And strategy 5, having a system that really helps us to funnel and focus in our efforts. We have focus schools here, and all of our schools have looked at their data to say, what do I need to get great at, because this is an area where we need to grow. And then having protocols for how you look at data and how you start to move on and expand that through your schools. Strategy 6, of course, we're continuing to do creative things and pilot and resources. When you hear building thinking classrooms, that was the goal of the magnet schools, right? You find something great, it's like a medical model. If it solved the problem, spread it, right? And those are the things we're doing. You hear like BTC. You're seeing that elementary because we're finding that kids, 1, want to stand up, and 2, can learn from each other if they can visibly see their thinking, right? How often have you tried to show math and can't find the words for it? Visualization means everything sometimes to students, and you start to think, wow, he's a genius. I hadn't thought about it that way. So we're growing those practices.
And you're seeing check marks by strategy 2 and 4. We believe these are major shifts in practice. We've accomplished that. We can say that confidently, that we've made the shift to the alignment with science of reading and the foundational skills K through second grade. We still have work to do, but we've made that fundamental shift. And so we put a check mark there, and we have the progress, in progress sort of icon there is helping us to say this is where we can go deeper with the work and continue to see improved outcomes for students.
Shout out to Rhonda, too. I know IT also helped us with sort of bringing the infographics, making the story easier to tell. On this next slide, if you look, that expansion of the early childhood, I know that's something that the board was really passionate about when we looked at the strategic plan, giving our students an opportunity to get into school. Sometimes the gap starts because you just got out the gate late. And so we have opened up pre-K at Garden Hills, 40 additional seats, 40 students that didn't get a chance to get in. Full day.
Full day, yep.
Talk about an opportunity for not just the students, but the parents. And then, of course, the strategy 2, we want to be able to look quickly at what's happening. Our data dashboard is public and front-facing. You can see that. We have other dashboards, but we can now see all those pieces at our fingertips to see what's moving and what's shifting from enrollment to attendance and discipline to performance. Rhonda and her team is working on synergy, so we're going to make it a lot easier. It's going to push our master scheduling up. All of the principals are getting ready. So we're going to migrate over to a new system. So we continue to stay advanced as it relates to technology. And, ECRA group, we want to predict where we're going and have other people that are objective tell us what it is that they see from the outside. It's always a good check and balance. So you're just not internally looking at your own data, but you have other people and you're looking at other people around you. In strategy 3 here, we talked about root causes, the systems and policies and things like that that are in the way of students feel like they have access. That's why we want to spread AVID, right? It should not just be the elective. If those strategies are good, they should be good for all students. And so that's where you see a lot of the spread of those practices. And there was a study session around gifted and detracking. Sometimes getting those students in the classroom, they bring an added perspective. They expand their learning. They also bring new learning. So we are embracing that diversity and looking at how we can, once again, get traction out of our diversity here in Unit 4. Access to high-quality instruction. Defining co-teaching. Suzanne, I know her team is really looking at that. At one point we looked at the 6 different methods for co-teaching. We're going back in now to talk about what does co-teaching really look like and the role of leveraging 2 adults in that space to help kids. And if we can do better as working with one another as adults, I think we can take care of our children. And Suzanne, I don't know if you want to jump in, you can feel free to jump in, but we're working on that piece too for strategy 4. In strategy 5, really about offering students multiple pathways to graduate from high school. I'm hoping if the students are listening, and sometimes they chime in, at 9:27, there's a path for you. There is something for you outside of high school, and we want to open multiple pathways for students to let them know you don't have to fit in a cookie cutter type of environment. And I think we're doing that. I think LaShawna's been here talking about CTE pathways. Dr. Jackson's been here with AVID. We're expanding our partnerships across the city. We have our trades. We have a career fair coming up in February. We want all of our students to feel like they matter and there's something great about each of them. Strategy 6, where we're investing in technology. You saw it during COVID. Everybody had a device. We were getting hotspots, communities netted, and if you needed a replacement, you're able to get it. My kid forgot her charger the other day. I was like, you know what? You're late. You better go to Chrome Depot. She said, I think I will. Now, you have opportunities to still engage in network across those spaces, and I think IT has done a phenomenal job with that. Technology is no longer a divide in our schools. In strategy 7, scaling and piloting and increasing the percentage of seats at high-performing schools and registering our kids. I know that we went from choice to assignment, student assignment, everybody having a seat. And of course, piloting and scale accelerated learning programs that increased access to rigor. Rigor is that's the goal for all of our students. I think that all students are brilliant, and if we raise the bar and we raise our expectations, regardless of who's sitting in front of us, we know that we're going to raise achievement. Starts with an opportunity to sit in the seat, opportunity to learn, get on a bus, step on a campus, see a new job. And I think that, we're all committed to that. Our team and our board and our community is committed to that piece. Try to go fast so we can sort of wrap these pieces up.
Yep.
Anybody want to?
And this is where we've said that our strategic plan is our roadmap. It's our guide. Dr. Boozer, you said it's one of the documents that brought you to Unit 4. We're proud of the work. We're proud of our anti-racism resolution. We hope you see the alignment of the work that guides our district improvement and help to impact the data that you saw today. Part of our partnership with Focus Schools is to give that continuous improvement cycle to our schools as well. So these are some of the questions that we use with them to help guide the school improvement plans that you'll see in the consent agenda. Dr. Watson, Christelle Harding helped to work through some of these questions with our schools to make sure that their school improvement plans are tied to the supports our students and teachers need, that they're tied to measurable outcomes and specific action steps. So you have those copies, and again, we don't just do that for schools who are in the school improvement status. That is for each and every student. It is best practice in education, and we're here to help support them. The addition of having Dr. Watson here and Christelle Harding in their roles really helps to make a big difference in that commitment.
And it was crucial for me to have this slide here for you because, like we said, we talked about the data, but it's not enough just to talk about it. But these are the steps, part of the steps that we're using to develop action plans, because there's it doesn't make sense to have a school improvement plan without actions and measurable actions. And so these are things that our staff members have opportunity and access to. This is what we're doing. We have to figure out how to work this together. This is the best part of the power of we, because we can present this to you and we can provide the resources, but we have to make sure our staff in our buildings know what they're doing, they get what they deserve so that they feel supported, and guess what? Then our students will rise to the occasion. So Dr. Ward, you said it perfectly. All of our students can do it. If we have low expectations, that's what we're going to get. If we have high expectations with support and scaffold, then that's what we're going to get. We're going to get our students are going to rise to the occasion. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Dr. Boozer. And I already talked about this slide. Board Member Holder, you had mentioned it, and I talked about that, our partnership with the ECHR group, what they'd bring as far as program evaluation, predictive data analytics. Every dot on that screen is a student. And we have to remember that every time we're talking about data, we're inviting our students into the conversation. And we want them at the table. We want to look at the data to help inform our practice and to continue that improvement process. This program can be looked at the school level, at the grade level, at the teacher level, and at the district level. So to be able to adjust and move the reports to meet the needs of any conversation so that our students are at the table with us as we're making decisions is going to be, I believe, a game changer. Thank you for your time, and we'll open up for other questions and comments.